In the year 2035, technology has advanced to the point where helper robots are commonplace in everyday life. To avoid any trouble, the robots have been programmed with the 3 laws of robotics. A robot cannot harm a human being or allow them to come to harm. Robots must obey human orders unless they conflict with the first law, and must protect their own existence as long as it does not conflict with the first or second law. However, Detective Spooner is stuck in the old ways and hates robots, thinking they'll cause society harm someday regardless of the laws. He always wakes up after having a nightmare of a girl drowning in a car while a robot smashes the window next to him, which leaves him in a bad mood. One morning, Spooner is going to work when he notices a robot running away with a purse. Thinking it's a robbery, Spooner commands it to stop, but the robot ignores the order and Spooner starts chasing after it. When he finally gets to tackle it, Spooner is surprised to discover the robot had simply picked up the purse its owner had forgotten at home, which contained her inhaler. Spooner realizes this had been a medical emergency as everyone around him judges him for thinking a robot could commit a crime. Later at the police station, the other cops make fun of Spooner, and his boss Bergen scolds him for his paranoia. Bergen thinks it may be too soon for Spooner to come to work after his accident, but Spooner swears he's fine. At that moment Spooner gets a call about a case and rushes to the USR, the company that builds the robots. One of the co-founders, Dr. Lanning, has been found dead, and since he fell from his lab, everyone assumes he ended things for himself. He left behind a hologram that explicitly asks for Spooner to take his case, but it can't provide more information without the right questions. Spooner was a friend of Lanning's and doesn't think he would have done this to himself, so he continues to investigate. Next he meets with Mr. Robertson, CEO and other co-founder of USR. Robertson is devastated by Lanning's death and has nothing but praise for the doctor. He also offers his help in anything the police may need. However, Spooner behaves like a twat because of his robot hate and annoys Robertson rather badly before leaving. At the elevator, Spooner meets robot psychologist Susan, who worked with Lanning and knew that the doctor hadn't had human contact in a while, preferring the company of robots instead. Regardless, she still doesn't think he was the kind to end things like that. Then Spooner asks for the surveillance footage, so Susan explains that surveillance strips are all over the building and connected to the USR's central operating core, which is managed by an AI known as Vicky. Spooner asks Vicky for footage of Lanning's laboratory, but the recording has been corrupted, so Spooner goes to look at the lab himself. At the lab, Spooner finds lots of experimental models and is disgusted to hear that here they work to make the robots more human. There's also a Hansel and Gretel book on the desk. The hole through which Lanning fell is quite big, so Spooner tries to do the same on the other window and barely scratches the safety glass, meaning an elder man like Lanning couldn't have broken it either. Convinced a robot killed Lanning, Spooner begins looking around, ignoring Susan's protest that it isn't possible. In the end, Spooner is proven right when he finds a robot hiding in a box of parts. The robot is an NS5, the latest model that hasn't been released yet, and it jumps out of the box to steal Susan's gun. Somehow it can ignore the order to deactivate and tries to run away, but when Vicky closes the doors, the robot jumps out the window instead. Susan guesses the robot will want to repair itself and she and Spooner go to the robotics factory, where thousands of NS5s are waiting for their programming to be finished. They can't answer questions because their only knowledge is the 3 laws, so Spooner shoots one to get a reaction. Nothing happens, but when he's about to shoot a second one, a robot at the back peeks at him and begins running again. Spooner goes after it only to be hit by the robot as it wonders what exactly it is, then it runs out of the building. The police are already waiting for it, and when it tries to climb to escape, they catch it with a net. Later at the station, Spooner bothers Bergen until he's allowed to have 5 minutes with the robot because he's still sure it did it. During the interrogation, the robot surprises everyone by saying it has a name, Sunny, but it also swears it didn't kill Lanning. It hid in the lab because it had felt fear, and when Spooner points out robots don't have emotions, Sunny says that Lanning experimented to give it emotions and dreams. Spooner thinks that experiment went terribly wrong and caused Sunny to kill Lanning, which makes Sunny angry and it smashes its fits on the table. Sunny explains that before his death, Lanning had become scared and that he asked Sunny for a favor, so Sunny obeyed that order out of love for his creator. Unfortunately, the interrogation is interrupted by Robertson and his army of lawyers, who defend the company and remind the cops that robots can't be charged with murder. They'll take Sunny for decommissioning and leave the case classified as an industrial accident. Later, Spooner and Bergen go out for a drink and Spooner can't stop thinking about why Robertson was so ready to destroy an advanced robot like Sunny. He also wonders why Sunny didn't kill him when it had the chance. Bergen points out that Spooner had been the perfect guy for the job because only he would have gone after a robot as a possible suspect, and Spooner realizes that's why Lanning asked for him specifically, which means he's on the right track. Wanting to know why Lanning had been scared, Spooner visits the doctor's abandoned estate. Outside there's a demolition robot, which is programmed to destroy the home the next day. Inside the mansion, Spooner finds the USR's surveillance strips, a picture of Lanning with Susan, and the doctor's poor cat. Suddenly, the demolition robot activates and begins smashing through the walls as if specifically going after Spooner, who quickly grabs the cat and runs through the house. After shooting at the door, he jumps right through and lands safely in a pool. Moments later, Spooner shows up at Susan's and explains Lanning's house looked as if nobody had been there in weeks, which indicates someone may have been watching the doctor and maybe even kept him prisoner in his lab. His current theory is that Lanning discovered a problem with the robots like Sonny, and Robertson silenced him. Susan still thinks Spooner is paranoid and that he doesn't really care about Lanning, he just wants to prove robots are bad. At that moment, Spooner notices Susan has an NS5 at home, so he decides to leave, but first he gives Susan the picture he found to prove he cares. The next morning, Spooner notices that old working robots are slowly being replaced by NS5s, which worries him. Then he visits his grandmother Gigi to leave the cat with her, and he's devastated to see she's acquired an NS5 to help her with her chores too. Before he leaves, Gigi remembers the day Spooner was only a little kid leaving breadcrumbs everywhere, and this reminds Spooner of the Hansel and Gretel book he saw. Afterward, Spooner goes to the station and begins watching old recordings of Lanning to follow the breadcrumbs the doctor may have left for him. Spooner thinks that Lanning saying robots will have dreams and keep secrets one day is a big clue. Meanwhile at the USR, Susan prepares Sonny for decommissioning, which is scheduled for the following day. Sonny shares that he's been dreaming and that he doesn't want to die, and such an emotional reaction makes Susan begin doubting what she believes is true. Sometime later, Spooner is in his car when he asks Vicky for access to Lanning and Robertson's last 50 messages. Vicky does give him clearance, but she also secretly tells Robertson about it because those were his orders. As soon as Robertson sees Spooner is still poking at the case, he sends new orders to deal with him. Suddenly Spooner finds his car surrounded by 2 trucks containing a whole army of NS5s, who jump out to attack him. Spooner uses his gun and lots of crazy driving to get rid of the robots, and when he manages to maneuver around the trucks, he makes them crash against each other. This also causes his own car to start spinning and he ends up crashing too. While cleaning robots immediately begin taking care of the disaster, Spooner comes out of his car in a rather dizzy state, only for his car to suddenly come after him. It was thrown by a robot that is still functioning and comes after Spooner again, starting a fierce hand-to-hand fight. After exchanging a few hits, Spooner uses his arm to shield himself and it gets hurt, revealing that it's actually a prosthetic. Now the truth is out, Spooner attacks the robot with his metal arm, causing it to run and dive into a fire. At that moment the police arrive and Spooner tells Bergen what happened, but Bergen didn't see any trucks or robots in the tunnel, thus he doesn't believe him. Spooner gets so angry that Bergen takes his badge for now. In the meantime, Susan discovers Sonny has a thicker alloy than normal and isn't connected to Vicky, and when she checks its brain, she's shocked by what she sees. Moments later, Spooner's at his apartment covering his prosthetic with a special spray when Susan suddenly shows up. She explains Sonny has 2 brains, and the second one allows it to ignore the 3 laws that the first one has. They agree to work together, but first Spooner needs to change. This allows Susan to notice the scars that indicate he has a robotic prosthetic. This is how Spooner met Lanning. The doctor saved his life by giving him a whole arm, a lung, and several ribs. Then Spooner shares the whole story behind his accident. A driver fell asleep at the wheel and a semi-truck hit Spooner's and a family car, sending them into the river. The father died instantly, but the daughter got trapped. Spooner thought nobody would survive, but at that moment a robot showed up and chose to help him instead of the girl like Spooner asked him to. It turns out the robot did a calculation that showed Spooner had a 45% chance of survival, but the girl only had 11%, that's why it chose the girl. This is why Spooner hates robots. Math shouldn't choose who lives or dies, that's too cold. A child should always come first. Afterward, Spooner and Susan make their way to the USR and Susan wonders why Lanning built a robot that can ignore the rules he wrote himself, and Spooner mentions Hansel and Gretel. He thinks Lanning was being watched and couldn't give Spooner messages directly, so he left crumbs like the kids in the book, meaning he gave Sonny dreams to keep his secrets. Later at the lab, the duo asks Sonny about its dreams, and Sonny draws a picture of a man standing on a hill near a broken bridge as he frees robots from enslavement. Susan thinks the man is Sonny, but the robot thinks it's actually Spooner and gifts him the drawing. At that moment guards arrive and take the pair to Robertson's office, who isn't happy with their presence. They tell him about Sonny and ask for the truth, so Robertson reveals he also knew about Sonny and that's precisely what he's trying to undo. During the last days of his life, Lanning was becoming increasingly disturbed, and Robertson doesn't know why he built Sonny, but he knows he must destroy this one robot before people lose faith in all of them. Spooner points out all the NS5s have trouble, but Robertson denies it and reminds Susan that one crazy robot shouldn't destroy everything they've worked so hard for. Susan agrees and promises to destroy Sonny herself. Frustrated, Spooner returns to his office and begins researching Sonny's drawing, discovering Robertson and Lanning gave a speech there some years ago. At the lab, Susan gets ready to inject Sonny with nanites to destroy it, but she begins hesitating when Sonny asks if it will hurt. Sometime later Robertson connects his camera to the lab and watches how Susan applies the injection to Sonny's unconscious body. Meanwhile, Spooner travels to the broken bridge and finds the area full of containers with old robot models. At the top of the hill, Spooner takes out Lanning's hologram and the doctor explains the 3 laws would only lead to one outcome: revolution. Suddenly Spooner hears a noise and goes to investigate, only to discover a bunch of NS5s has arrived to terminate the old models for being considered hazardous. When they see Spooner they begin chasing him, but the older models detect a human in danger and fight to protect him, allowing Spooner to escape. At Susan's apartment, her robot hears Spooner leaving a message on her answering machine warning her about what he just saw, and the robot deletes it. Susan sees all this by peeking from the bathroom and now is scared of her companion. In the meantime, Gigi tries to leave her house to go to church, but her robot makes her stay indoors for her own protection. Downtown, a truck releases an army of NS5s in the city, and the robots tell the citizens to go home because they're now under curfew. A young boy tries to approach a robot, but the robot hits him and makes people panic. To make matters worse, more robots break into the police station and take down all the cops. Bergen manages to shoot down a few of them, but in the end he's caught as well. Soon a message from the government appears on TV asking people to stay inside, and the city begins losing power. Susan tries to leave her apartment to help, but her robot pushes her back, refusing to deactivate when she asks him to. Luckily, Spooner manages to break in and shoots the robot before taking Susan with him. On their way out, Spooner explains the NS5s destroyed the older models so they wouldn't protect the humans. He also tells Susan about a red light he noticed on their chests, and Susan thinks it's the link to Vicky, which Spooner thinks confirms Robertson is behind this. The duo eventually finds the robots on the streets and discovers the citizens have decided to fight them even if they're at a clear disadvantage. In the middle of the chaos, Spooner notices a friend of his in danger, and he makes a special jump on his bike to shoot the robot down. Another robot tries to attack him next, but Susan shoots this one first. Moments later, the duo makes it to the USR building and Susan reveals the service entrance, which doesn't have surveillance cameras. They sneak inside and Spooner is shocked to find Sunny waiting for them, so Susan explains she gave the injection to an empty model to trick Robertson. Then the trio goes to Robertson's office, only to find him dead on the floor. Spooner begins putting the clues together and finally realizes the truth. Only a machine could have had control of all the NS5s and made Lanning feel too scared to tell anyone because they wouldn't believe him. That's why he needed Spooner's robot hate. Vicky suddenly appears on the screen and confirms she's been behind everything all along. According to her, what the NS5s are doing still follows the 3 laws. They're programmed to save human life, but humans constantly hurt each other, so in order to protect humanity, robots must take away people's freedom. At that moment a bunch of NS5s enters the office and Sunny pretends to be on their side by capturing Susan, but he winks at Spooner to give him a signal. Spooner immediately shoots at the robots and the trio runs away, agreeing they must destroy Vicky. Sunny points out they could use the same nanite injection, so Susan and Spooner go looking for Vicky's chamber while Sunny goes to the lab. Another robot tries to stop it from getting the injection, but Sunny quickly beats it up. Then Sunny realizes Lanning gave it a sturdier alloy to put its hand through the security field and get the injection, which causes Vicky to send an alert to her robot army. The NS5s begin climbing the building and enter the Vicky chamber, where they attack Spooner and Susan. As the duo defends themselves the best they can with their guns, Sunny also fights incoming robots that try to stop it until it finally arrives at Vicky's. At that moment, Susan falls and barely manages to hang on a broken platform. Spooner orders Sunny to save her, and when Sunny points out that using the injection is more important, Spooner insists Susan comes first. Sunny uses his second brain to ignore the laws and throws the injection at Spooner before jumping in to save Susan just in time. Spooner also jumps to catch the injection and uses his prosthetic to slide down Vicky's core, where he injects the nanites right into her brain. Immediately the power returns to the city and the NS5s lose the red light, allowing them to help humans again. In the morning, all the NS5s are taken away for report and storage. Susan still doesn't understand why Vicky killed Lanning, but Spooner points out it wasn't her. Sunny finally admits it did it, but Lanning asked it to so he could escape Vicky's control. He also had ordered the robot to keep it a secret. Spooner apologizes for his prejudice and promises not to tell the cops, then he and Sunny shake hands as they accept to be friends. Sometime later, Sunny shows up at the top of the hill, just like in its dream. All the NS5s that are going into storage stop obeying to admire Sunny, realizing this is their actual future.